Welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is Greg Schmidt and I'll be your presenter for today's presentation. And I'll be taking you through our main topic of stop struggling with manual AP processes. Did you know that about 60 to 90% of all manual AP tasks can be eliminated with automation? So today I'll be talking about the two different components of an AP automation process that involve the data extraction and workflow approvals and matching process. And also when implementing these two forms of workflow automation, it leads to higher levels of AP efficiency and accuracy within inside of organizations. That translates into less tedious work for departmental users and more time to be spent on high ROI activities that drive the business forward. Today's agenda that I'm going to focus around on that main topic that I talked about is, around how to stop struggling with the manual AP processes. But I'm really going to focus around those two areas of workflow, the capture workflows and how that part works with the data extraction, and then also that approval and matching process. But first, I'm going to start with a quick conversation around some of the top challenges that AP departments are facing today. And then I want to cover, what we're hearing from our customers and what they're needing in an AP automation solution. And then I'm going to do a quick overview demonstration of the WebDocs AP automation solution, focusing in on those two main areas of user interfaces for the capture workflows, so being able to handle exceptions and stuff in there, and also that approval process and how that works in there as well. And then we'll finish up with some Q&A if time permits at the end. And remember, today's event is being recorded, and you'll receive a link to the recording after the event is over that you can use to rewatch, or if you missed anything, or if someone in your organization could not attend today's event and you want to be able to send them that as well. Please enter any questions that you might have during the webinar here today into the chat window, and I will address them towards the end of the webinar. Again, my name is Greg Schmidt. I'm the Senior Solutions Engineer here at Fortra with 24 years of industry experience, with my expertise really in the document and forms automation area, accounts payable, accounts receivable, intelligent document capture that we'll be talking about today, robotic process automation, and also business intelligence. I also have over 2 decades worth of experience in the IBMI report and data distribution areas. And over the years, I've been key in helping companies automate their document and data processes and streamlining the way their business uses technology and help them with their strategic planning processes for digital transformation. So this is so I've been around and I have a lot of experience in these different areas. At Fortra, the document and forms automation solutions have been helping companies for decades on their digital transformation and automation journeys. Our true mission is, helping customers bring efficiency to their business processes by streamlining the ways companies create, capture, and securely manage and do distribution on their business documents, processes, and data. The document and forms management lifecycle is how the documents flow through the organization's processes. Understanding these document stages is very critical to optimizing the capture, management, distribution, and security of business information. Fortra has a variety of solutions to assist with every phase of the life cycle, helping you save money and increasing efficiencies and security inside your business. Now I'm going to cover some of the current AP business challenges within the AP department, right? So, starting out with, a lot of you already know that, companies are looking and needing an AP automation solution in their organization to help them with, a lot of automation capabilities, right? So taking that I'll call it the day-to-day painful areas out of their process, right? The number one area, so if you summarize this all into one, AP is an intense, inefficient manual business process in most cases, right? And underneath that, why that is because the number two is technically could be the number one in this case, right? Is the manual data entry and the document preparation. So today we're going to talk about the capture workflow and how we can remove that process and that manual entry inside of there. And then number three is sort of the next stage, right? The manual routing for approvals might happen via email, might happen, sometimes via paper, putting it on someone's desk, but then you have to remember to go back and get that information. So with the system you'll see here today, keeps track of all that information. And then part of that process too is as we're bringing that automation into and doing those manual or doing some automation routing inside of there to remove the manual routing, we can do to and through-way matching inside of there, right? So a lot of this process today is very, inside of organizations, is very manual in some cases, right? Or they might have to and through-way matching in their ERP system, but it might not be set up and configured the right way for them to to be able to take advantage of that in some cases. And we'll talk about that a little bit later too on how we can help with that. Duplicate and late payments, making sure that things ain't duplicated and stuff like that and are paid on time. Loss and misplaced documents, that goes back to sort of that routing process, right? So sometimes things can be forgotten, right? You send an email to someone, they don't respond to it, or you put a piece of paper on someone's desk, stuff gets stacked on top of it. So it really comes back to, being able to follow up and have technology do a lot of this work for you in this process. And this is something I always like to bring up in here too, is the human value of automation, right? Automation is something don't be scared of automation, right? Automation is not about replacing staff with software, right? It's really about streamlining routine tasks to focus your team on solving problems technology can't, right? So, taking some of these, call manual entry processes, turning your data entry people into more review processors, or, giving them other tasks, since it's going to, lighten some of that load up on that, on their side. But don't be scared of the technology from that standpoint, because it's not replacing humans always in this case. It's to bring them the capability to let the business grow, but for the business to grow, people need to be able to focus on not the day-to-day, processes and stuff like that. So a lot of that stuff can be done with automation. And this is one of the things I want to talk about here too. We get a question all the time that people ask. It's like, why are there different requirements for each company? Right. So when we get into some of these, why are there different, processes inside of here? And if you look at this diagram, right, there's two sort of common areas, right? There's the incoming documents are going to come from some kind of source, right? Could be email, could be scanning, could be folder monitoring. And then the end process is going to be inside your ERP system, the vouchering process and the payment process, right? But if you look right in the middle of this process, right, and look at it and why it's different, right? This is the difference between every company. It's the process inside of there. It's it might be different organizations that you work with, or different companies that I should say that, different locations or something like that, and have different approval processes and stuff inside of there. Different ERP systems do different things. The middle process is what we really focus on, right? The beginning and the end are sort of the commonalities inside of the process, but we really focus in on that middle part of it, and that's why our solution is configurable to businesses, right? So we look at the box, I'll call it, right? And then say, hey, our software works in this box, but you need to be able to configure these, these 10 or 20 things inside of there. Because what we don't want to do is take a process that you currently have and automate it if there's inefficiencies inside of it, because that doesn't do you any good from that standpoint. So we really focus in on the process, and our software really focuses in on that middle piece here to be able to configure to those different areas with with a set of automation. And that goes to, what organizations are asking for, accounts payable automation solution, right? And a lot of this we'll be talking about today is automated capture of invoices, so being able to monitor accounts, email accounts, folders, locations, websites in some cases even, and have them download. Data extraction, remove the manual entry. Use intelligent document classification and OCR extraction to do that process. Three-way matching processes, being able to check, their current systems and other systems to be able to, do matching, so they're not having to do it manually, from that standpoint. Monitoring tasks through completion. This is a big one for approvals, so there's no babysitting, right? So being able to not lose things inside the process. And deadlines for approvals. So again, no bottlenecks inside this process, right? So you don't want to create bottlenecks in there. So you can move things forward, move things back inside the process. Single interfaces, right? So being able to have a single interface for approvers and AP to be able to work inside the system is key. And then integration, I think, is always key, right? And having some kind of integration capabilities to a business system to be able to do the matching. If it's if it's an IBM solution, or if it's a Windows solution, homegrown solution, having that, system agnostic integration, I think is key in that process. And then another one is web interfaces. Having, anytime a user has to get in the loop inside of an automation process, have a web interface to be able to, work with inside that process, because they don't want to have applications or clients on there, even though you can, right? The goal would be to, go to more of a web-based or mobile kind of an infrastructure, especially with, people working at home or hybrid kind of environments today. You want to be able to give that kind of process. Now, if you look at this sample process flow, right? Here's a workflow before, without automation, right? Kind of a feel, and it has all the different steps inside of here, from again, from submitting, vendor submitting an invoice, all the way down to the search and retrieval of the document in the archive, right? To the payment process. But if you look at this process, I always look at it and go, what does automation help with, and what can we do inside this process? Because it shouldn't be the same amount of steps after automation kicks in. So if you look at the next slide here, we break it down into 5 steps technically then, right? So we can remove a lot of those different processes and steps inside the process, simply because we're using the technology to guide through this process and remove some of the need for that human interaction in those very time-consuming tasks. Now, this is I'll call it the main section of the webinar that I really want to focus on here, because I think this is key to understanding, the accounts payable automation. And I when I'm doing demonstrations and stuff like that, sometimes this can get confusing in there, because there is 2 types of workflows, right? There is a capture workflow process that's happening, with the documents being captured, data extraction process, and then from that process, it then passes that information into your business system or ERP system, but also into an approval or matching workflow process. So there is sort of that, I'll call it a 2-pronged approach for workflows. There's a capture workflow and the approval and matching workflows. So inside this process, in the capture workflow, if you think about what this is doing, there's sort of 2 parts to this one, right? There's the automation of the invoice capture that we're monitoring from the, from an email or a folder or a scanned document coming into the system. But then there's this middle piece in here, right? That we're doing data extract. First of all, we're doing document classification and making sure it's an invoice, or what kind of document is it? Is it a PO, or what is it, right? Bill of lading, any kind of those supporting documents. And then we're doing data extraction on that information, on that classification, right? So we're saying, okay, yep, it's an invoice. We're going to extract the data. Here's the information. And we're extracting that information and using technology, out of the box technology, which we'll talk about here in a second, to be able to, learn and do certain things with it. But we're also doing lookups with that information. So we can look at database information in that process to say, hey, is there a vendor with this vendor name? If we extracted the vendor name or vendor number, look at an address or something like that, is that information inside the ERP system? So we can do lookups with that information to make sure that we're validating, not just extracting data, but validating that everything that we're extracting is correct and putting it into the process. Yep. And then in the second part of that, with that capture workflow process, is the technology that we're, or the process or the channels of capture that we're going through, right? Are we monitoring emails? Are we scanning documents? Are we using network folders, and then monitoring websites, or do we have a submission form even? With one of our other products, our WebDocs forms management process, we can create a collection form that allows you to be able to collect and drop that information into the automation process, or go into more of an interactive manual process. So there's the channels of capture process. Now, inside the data extraction process, and you'll see this in the live demonstration in true form, there's invoice action capability. This is the out of the box technology, right? I always put 50%. It's usually higher. It's usually about 60 to 75% out of the box. It just depends on the documents and the quality. From that standpoint, I always put 50% to be safe. But the goal to this process when we do an implementation is to be able to use these stages of technology and have the configuration capability to be able to use invoice actions to say, out of the gate, we're going to grab this information, we're going to pull this off the documents, but then you can teach it or use self-learning or interactive teaching through the process, and I'll show this in the live demonstration as well, is use what we call advanced auto-find. And this is more of a departmental AP kind of an interface where they can teach it certain things during a process, right? So as a document comes in, they can actually click and they can say, hey, look for it's a floating total. Look for the floating total in this line or this column, right? That brings us to 75 to 90%. I usually and sometimes 100% at that point. But then the last part of it is definition creation. Definition creation is a way for us, it's not a template. Think of it as like a way to create extraction business rules, meaning that we can look at, target zones. It might be a larger zone on a document to say, hey, somewhere in this top left corner, in this 4x4 area up on top, is going to be the total, and you can tag certain information inside of there, so stuff can shift around inside of there. So it's not really I'll call it a true template, because templates are painful in those cases, right? A template is a zonal template is locking it into just a certain location only. With a definition, with those zones, with more of that block information, you can get a larger area for it to sort of swipe through. And what we use this for too is, hard to define invoices. Maybe you have a large volume vendor that has a really weird formatted invoice, or you have to do special things with it inside of there, meaning special, calculations or something like that, or special validations and stuff inside of it. So we can actually use the definition creation to configure to that certain invoice structure. And then we also have something called the neural network. So the neural network is something that actually, so think of what the invoice actions module is, right? How it learns and stuff like that. If customers provide us samples, right? So each release that is done with this process, if customers can provide us, anywhere from 5 to 10 different samples for each of the main vendors that they want to have in the system, we can put that into a normal release. So the neural network think of it as a closed AI model, right? It's send us the samples, it can learn those different processes. We teach it inside the software, inside the development process, and teach it with that AI, cross-reference modules inside of there to be able to learn that information, and it goes to the core technology. So if you were using a definition, it might eliminate the need for definitions in some cases inside the application if we already have them in the learning process. But this is something that we do offer, so customers can send samples in. And in this process to learn in that mod, so we can actually teach it that model and put that learning capability or what it's the teaching method inside of the invoice actions module. So on that next release, when you upgrade, that information is already inside of there. So it's a nice offering from that standpoint to be able to teach it to get smarter, not just through the three core functions, but then taking it into the process of using the AI model in the background to actually absorb that information. Here's something as well. I always like to, so did you know, kind of comments inside here. 70% of small to medium businesses, confirm that they waste time every day on paper intensive processes and approvals. Right. So that's one of the leading into the next topic, right, of approval and matching workflows, right? So there's a lot of time being spent on the approvals and the matching processes. So inside of this process, again, so after the capture workflows happen, right, we can then put it into what we call the WebDocs invoice manager process. So there's a process in there, or a workflow process, that they go in there. So all the extracted data is then passed into this process. The documents are secured into the WebDocs DMS system in the background. We can do matching processes with business rules to the ERP system, and we can also do data validations and lookups inside of there. So it's really, really powerful piece there. And validations and stuff or approvals inside of here could be, drop-down based approvals where you might want to, launch things into, or it might be more of a process where you want to, have an automatic processing. So there is some table-driven stuff that we can do as well, and that can be configured in the application. Now here's a look inside the technology of the approval and matching process, right? There's a lot of different pieces in here, and it's really, some organizations use it all, some organizations don't use it all, and we'll go through some of the reasons why they might use it or not. But configurable approvals, there's document repository, to and through-way matching, auto deduplication processes, ERP integration capabilities, configurable business rules, geocoding integration. So there's a lot of different areas inside of there, but the WebDocs Invoice Manager is our configurable engine, right? There's an out-of-the-box functionality to it, but it's configurable to connect to your business systems to be able to do that to and through-way matching and get that information and approval process. So it has the workflow engine and all that good stuff built into it. Now, if you look at the matching process, like I was talking about, some people need it, some people don't, right? If you have it built into your ERP system already, and you don't need a workflow that's done in the ERP, then you can just you can still use the system. We can turn off some of those different functions inside of there, right? So the to and through matching does not have to happen in our WebDocs Invoice Manager process. It can happen in the ERP. But in most cases, even if you have, you might have some stuff set up inside the ERP system to be able to handle some of the matching processes, but it might be harder to configure inside of the ERP system. With our system, you can configure it to work with both. So you can say, hey, I want to run to and through matching in WIM, but still do some of that stuff inside of the ERP system. So we can actually have sort of a double two-way through-way matching process, right? A revalidation process, I'll call it, right? And once our system's done, it can populate it in there and it can revalidate it even to make it even 100% correct at that point. I mean, even though it's coming out 100% correct out of ours, it can even give it a secondary look at that point. Now, again, to and through matching processes, right? You're normally matching the invoice and the PO for the two-way match. The three-way match is normally going into the receipt received approval kind of process. But then when that matching processing happens, we could say, hey, the matching, we're waiting for match, so we can actually wait for a match and say, hey, we're waiting for that receipt to come in, or hey, the match came in, but we need it to route to a workflow, for someone to look at and do something with, because it's outside of a variance or something like that, right? Or something needs to be corrected inside of there. Purchasing needs to touch it, shipping needs to touch, so something needs to happen in there. But then also for the documents, and I'll talk about this and show this in the live demonstration, is inside the process where we're doing the to and through match, you might not have to touch anything, right? If all the business rules are all good and everything's good to go, we just pass that information into the ERP vouchering and payment process. So it can run through your normal process at that point. Now here's a look at sort of the process, right? I'll call it the journey of an invoice through automation at a detailed level, right? So automation takes that information, captures the invoice. We go through the auto classification, data extraction. All good. No exceptions are happening. We put the document into web docs to export the data to the ERP system. If there's a validation that needs to happen, we are then pushing that information into what we call the verification station, and that's, think of that as the capture workflow part of it, right? Where the user is going to interact with, and then also the web docs invoice manager part of it as well. So could kick off a process flow to say, hey, we need a workflow still to be able to, complete the variance process or get some more supporting information. So we can kick off workflows inside of there, and then do the matching and business rules and deduplication, all that stuff, and then pass that information to the ERP to process it through the system. So this is sort of that, I'll call it the little bit more detailed look to it, but the journey of an invoice kind of process, and how it sort of can flow through the organization. Now let's take a few minutes to even go a little bit more in depth into some of the web docs, web docs for accounts payable solution or web docs for AP process here, and how we can sort of go into this process, and then also be going into a live demonstration as well. But web docs for accounts payable really gives the AP process the efficiencies with automation, right? Our automated capture and intelligent OCR and classification technology is coupled along with our web docs invoice manager process and secure repository that also can be configurable with different kinds of workflow and approvals. The solution can integrate directly to your ERP, so it can update, it can pull data into it, which I'll show you, in the live demonstration. But it really is meant to work with inside your ERP system. We can even do lookups inside of your, if you have the capability to do integration into through your ERP or your application, we can do lookups. A button that actually looks up documents into the system as well. So we do have that capability. But web docs, for AP has that capability to be able to turn things on, turn things off. We don't want to recreate the wheel. So if something's working in the ERP system already, we can turn that off in our platform at that point, right? So the web docs invoice manager, make core product, you can turn off different services and stuff like that you might not need to configure at that point, from that standpoint. So it's nice to be able to have that configuration capability, because you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, right? You might change ERPs, you might need different functionality or different requirements come in. So our solution offers that capability. You might have to configure some stuff, but the software still has all the core capabilities. Now, some of the benefits, obviously, that we talked about already of an AP automation solution, enabling the invoice capture, no manual data entry process, right? Removing or the ability to customize approval processes, right? And just and approve from any kind of location, right? Since we're using web interfaces, configure business rules to be able to push through, ERP agnostic, having that flexibility to integrate into different models, right? If it's homegrown, if it's packaged software, if it's a cloud-based application, doesn't make a difference. Central repository, and this is a huge one. Central repository, we're talking AP, but that central repository can work outside of AP too. It could be for shipping documents. It could be for HR. It can be expanded. That's the power of the solution. We have a lot of companies in different organizations that we work with that buy it for a point solution for AP, but they expand it into other areas of the business. Audit version controls and approvals, structures are in there. So you could use that for AP, but you could also use that for other, other parts of the business as well. And intuitive, easy to use web interfaces, right? So all of our interfaces are very, I'll call it easy to use and very intuitive, right? And to be able to do that more work, like the AP interface is going to be more of an inbox style. Web docs is going to be more of a search style kind of structure. And you'll see that here in just a minute as we go through that. But it's a powerful piece there at that point. Another did you know? The need to process invoices faster with higher accuracy, right? So in the past, I would say 12 to 18 months, 78% of organizations are looking to bring some level of automation to their AP processes so they can process invoices faster with more accuracy, because a lot of that data entry process, there's a lot of room for error, from that standpoint, and the volumes are increasing in some cases, right? Organizations are growing, which is a good thing. So it's putting more stress on different areas of the departments and stuff like that. So being able to process invoices faster is a big need to bring in technology at that point. All right, so I'm going to get into the demonstration here from the application standpoint. First, starting with sort of I'll call it day in a life of AP professional improvers. What's the process and what's the interfaces look like? Again, focusing around the capture interfaces, and then focusing around um, the approval interfaces inside of here. But just another quick little journey of an invoice slide here, a little bit more simplified from that standpoint. So as documents come in through the automated capture and get processed through the system, they can go into what we call straight through processing, so no one has to touch them. So that's the ultimate process there, right? To be able to say nothing's done, all the matching is good to go. We don't need anything done with it. The next process is something did fail. So you'll see this one here, what we call the verification station. Invoices that need some kind of visual verification or correction. So technically exceptions only in this case, right? Would need to be able to touch. So I call more of a human in the loop kind of a interface inside of an automation process. And then the second part that you're going to see here today is that workflow process, right? Is the WebDocs invoice manager and how we can route those documents around to individuals. It could be AP, could be an approver, could be reviewers, but to be able to get that information and do certain things with it inside the process. Might be GL coding, might be, hey, I just need to put a note on here and tell them why I used FedEx instead of UPS, so why the shipping cost is more, right? So you can do that, but invoices that need some kind of approval, review, or GL coding inside the process. And then 3 here is your normal vouchering process that you currently have, right? So however you're vouchering documents, you can then, we format that information and push that information directly into your system. And then the last piece there is the secure archive that we're talking about, right? Having documents go into the archive, into the DMS system, and store that information in there to be able to look up through our web interface, or through, if you have any integration, into any other applications. All right. So the process I'm going to start with here is the capturing process, right? So I had some documents that I processed earlier into the system, and I'm going to start with what we call the verification workflow process, right? But in a normal process, documents are coming in through some method, right? Some channel, and mostly coming in via email or scan processes, right? But we have all these different channels to be able to bring this information into the system at that point. So once those documents come into the system, in this case, are being processed, the behind the scenes process is happening, right? So the engine is taking that information, and like I was talking about before, it's classifying the documents. It can split the documents up in the background if it needs to. It can do image cleanup. It extracts information at the header, footer, and line item detail level. So we can actually look at the full document top to bottom and extract every piece of information and understand it, do validation against it, run business rule, matching processes on it. So there's different things that we can do inside that process. Now, from the invoice process that we'll talk about here, that I'm going to show right now, is I'm going to go into this exception invoice handling inside the verification station, and then we'll talk about the workflows and the WebDocs invoice manager portion of it as well. So you can sort of see those 2 areas that might need that you need to be able to work with from an interface standpoint. So the first step in this process, right, is what we call the verification station, right? Meaning that I need to do something with these documents. I need to teach it something, or I need to correct something in this process. In this process here, I can actually go into the web verification station, and what this web verification station is going to allow me to do, and let me log in here. I'm gonna log into the system, and what this is going to bring up, it's going to bring me up a queue of batches of documents that need to be processed, right? So if you have one or if you have multiple processors, you can queue them up into different batches that people can grab. But in this process here, I'm going to go click on one of them here, and then I'm going to bring these up so I can sort of show you some of the different things that you can do with them. But this is it's going to tell you where the problems are. You don't have to figure out what the problems are, right? So it's going to tell you exactly what it extracted, what it didn't extract, or what it didn't like, right? Like in this case here, if I click on this first one, it's going to take me to the problem area. It's going to say, oh yeah, it didn't have the amount in there. So I can type that information or I can go click on it, right? So I can go do that from that standpoint. And if you see, if I go into here and I updated that rule corrected itself and extracted, and it did all that information. And the software is actually smart enough to look at certain things. So if I change this, say it pulled off 100 as a quantity instead of 200, you'll see it's actually smart enough to throw a table arithmetic error inside of here, right? So it's smart enough to understand that if something failed because of the data extraction process is not right. So it's very smart, from that standpoint, and it'll tell you if it found a problem. And in this one here, it actually couldn't find the PO number. So in this case here, this is actually a really cool part of the application. There's a functionality inside here with that advanced auto find, or think of it as self-learning kind of a function, right? Or you can teach it, right? So I can teach it where that information's at. So I can come in here and actually say, hey, this is the PO number in this location for this vendor. And there's a function inside of here that allows you to learn and relearn a document. So I can actually learn or relearn this document after I click on something to be able to tell it something inside of here. There's also another function inside of here. So if say that there's this advanced auto find wizard inside of here, the wizard's going to allow you to be able to columnize information and be able to put certain information in there a little bit differently. Like say I want to be able to say, hey, there's a floating total over here. I can create a column over here to be able to do that. So this wizard actually is another way to be able to do that. So the number one way to do that is just point and click and do certain things with inside of here and teach it or relearn the document. But then you also have the advanced auto find wizard that you can actually draw like a column and say, hey, the total is going to float within this column or something. So it's really cool from that standpoint. It allows you to sort of walk through these documents, right? So it gives you the capability to think of this as a wizard kind of structure. And it's going to tell you where the problem's at. It's going to say, hey, the problem's, hey, it's going to be inside of here. I didn't get an item number. This is a perfect use case where I might want to create a definition because the structure of this document is a little bit different than a normal document. But this is going to allow me to come in here and use that functionality be able to say, hey, go and find that information. Here's that information, and populate it from that where I'm clicking at. So that gives you the capability there. This next document is one that it found multiple matches on. And this one happens to be because of the phone number is a generic phone number, and they have 4 locations. So in this case here, we can pull open the database and then populate that information into there. From a selection option. But we also could do something a little bit different here too, is maybe not use the phone number, but maybe use the company address or something like that. So we can get a little bit more granular if we need to in some of these cases to do that or to be able to process that information. And then the other option inside of here, is the data validation portion of it. It's just basically from a confidence level, and you can turn the confidence up and down after a while. But one of the confidence thing, it's just basically saying, hey, I just want to make sure I'm not 100% or 75% confident on that this is the right information. So it's going to ask you to validate that information is correct and then process it through the system. So it's just going to give you a quick check and reference inside of there to be able to do that. And then after that process, you can hit the send the batch. The send the batch option is going to push the data to the ERP system, and it's going to push the document to the WebDoc system in that case. So it's going to give you that capability to be able to process through. Now, from the other side of the process, the WebDocs invoice manager is the next piece, right? And this is now where workflow could come into this effect, right? So we could say, hey, we got an accounts payable queue everything's going to dump into, and then from there it can be directed out to the different locations or the different business areas, right? At that point, so we can create different workflows inside of here to be able to do that. Now, the interface that people are going to be using to be able to access that information is going to be our WebDocs invoice manager. So think of AP and any approvers. This is going to be their single interface to be able to do approvals on. So they can come into the system and say, hey, I need to go and look at my queue, do approval, do whatever, or what do I need to do approval on? This is going to give them their information. And we normally break this out into categories like PO-based invoices and non-PO-based invoices. And this is going to give them the capability to get into that information and pull it open at that point. So in this case here, I'll pull open one of these here so you can sort of see these, but I can actually click on this, and this information is all the data that was extracted in the document or from the document process. And then at the header, footer, and line item detail level. So we're filling that information in. And you see in that any of these blue buttons are connected to the ERP system or your databases too. So like for PO lookups, for GL coding, for receipts and stuff like that. You'll see in my receipt option here, I don't have a capability to for a drop down on a receipt. I have this one failing, so it stops, because normally this one would go straight through because there's no errors on it because it actually has a receipt for it. But if I go and correct the receipt and actually pick the right PO number inside of here, you're going to see now I have a receipt for this one. So if I did not select it here, right, this is where the matching process behind the scenes can auto match that and actually select that information and process it through. So it can do that auto match process and pull it in. So then I can save and exit, and that's going to, after whatever time process here, it will actually go through the process and actually process it through. So so from a functionality standpoint, that's really nice to be able to interact with those different ones at that point. And the same thing for another one. So like in this case here, same thing. I can come in here and say, hey, I'm gonna update that, and then for receipt numbers, the receipts are going to show up here, so I can say, oh yeah, this is that one, and this one is the delivery charge. There we go. And then I can come up and save and exit that process, and it's going to go through the process and submit it and go through the different workflow structures at that point. GL coding processes. So for so normally in a PO process, we're not re-GLing and stuff like that. You could have GL coding there. GL coding normally comes into a process where, it might be like in a non-PO process, right? We're putting in society here, and we need to GL code by department or something like that. So this is where we can pull the GL code information or departmental code stuff from the ERP system. So there's no replication of data. We're actually hitting the ERP system live at that point, and then you can submit for approval. You can put notes on things, and then you can also add workflow processes in here as well. So there's different ways to be able to interact with the document in this process. Now we do have some analytics capabilities inside here. My system doesn't have a lot of data going through it, but at this time, but since I just did an upgrade on a new version here. But in this case here, we do have some analytics screens, so you can actually see some of of what's inside the system, what's been exported, what's to come, right? How much stuff do we got in the payables process and stuff like that. So that's going to give you the capability to be able to see some of that information there. And this is also the system. I'm not going to get into the configuration part of it, but this is where, depending on your security and capability, we can set up different settings and automation capabilities. And these are our different modules that are sitting in the background that can be turned on or turned off, depending on if you need them or not, if your ERP system is using them. So we have different configuration screens inside of here to be able to help you with some of those different functions. So we do have that there. And then last of all, I just want to show you from the WebDoc standpoint. The WebDoc system is where the documents are stored, right? So you can log into the system and then get access to the documents inside of WebDocs via the search function, right? So you can come in here and say, hey, I need to go and search for a document or documents inside the system. Maybe it's a vendor invoice in this case. I can go and search for that invoice number or that vendor ID and then open that document up and look at that document directly in the web browser. So I can see that information here and actually interact with that document directly here, annotate on the document in the archive, do whatever I need to, redact. But this is going to give you that capability to have that interaction with the document. So say that 6 months later, a year later, you need to do something with the document, you can do that at that point as well. So that gives you the capability there. And this is the system that can be expanded, like I was talking about. We were talking about accounts payable, but we could actually have other repository areas inside of here that are secured for those different kinds of processes. So you do have that capability. And then from the export standpoint, I just got to, I know we're running up on time here. I just want to bring up one more thing here, and then we'll get into a couple questions here as well. But from a ERP and line of business system integration standpoint, our best practice is usually an export file. So our XML export file, that's going to be picked up by your import process. But we have some different methods there to be able to do that. It could be CSV or Excel. Usually it's a XML structure. We have REST API capability. We have database and staging table capability, and we also have RPA bot capability. So we have, if you have our Automate product, or if you need it, we have a RPA automation capability to be able to integrate into different ones. But really system agnostic integration at this point, right? We can integrate into any application kind of process. All right, now I'm just going to take a few minutes here, or a few seconds here to talk about, see if there's any questions here. So let me review if there's any questions that I might not have answered. Here's one. I think I already answered this one, but when I was doing the demonstration, we already have throughway matching set up in our ERP. Do we still need to configure the Fortra solution to do the throughway matching as well? The answer is no, right? If you need to, we can. But if you already have throughway matching, we can skip that in our process and just use it to format the data to the way your ERP system is needing that. Does the WebDocs for accounts payable solution have ways to integrate into cloud-hosted ERPs? Yes. So we have, so we can actually connect into cloud ERP systems, either via the export function, could be REST capability, could be via the Automate bot capability, the RPA bot function. So we have many different ways to be able to do that integration. So we would just need to, if it's something you're looking at, we can actually go through that process with you as well. So feel free to let us know as well. We can dive into that a little bit deeper with you as well. Let's see here. What ways can your solution be deployed? Yeah, I don't think I covered that. So it is a on-premise based system, but it is cloud enabled. We don't host it, but you can host it in AWS or Azure, or any of the hosting environments out there. But yeah, your license does support that function. But normally it's an on-premise kind of process that we would deploy, and it could be cloud enabled from your business standpoint. And I don't think I went into this one here. Basically, they're asking if there's ways to integrate into the ERP screens. I did mention it inside of there. But yes, there is ways to enter into the ERP screens. A lot of our companies that we work with, and we have some business partners that on the ERP side that actually have built integration into their screens and using our URL searching and have a button inside of their applications to be able to push a button and then launch documents from our repository. The best way to do that is maybe not our URL search, but actually use our REST API to be able to do that search. That way it's a more secure search function. All right, there's still a couple questions out there. I'm not going to go into them since we're over time here, but I will follow up with you after the webinar and get those answered for you, and get get back to you with any questions that go back and forth that we might need to do there. But I just want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. I hope you've learned, how AP automation can help your company be more efficient and get started, in a way to help you on that automation journey, right? If you're coming from a paper process, or if you have something today and it's not working for you, how can we help you more? So feel free to call us and work with us from that standpoint. We can help educate and go through the process with you during that. So, and also too, from a demonstration standpoint, feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to do a more detailed demonstration, maybe even use some of your sample invoices during the process to show you some of the accuracy and the capabilities of the solution and how they flow through the system. It's always nice to see your own documents going through, so feel free to reach out to us and actually show you that information. Again, you will receive a link to today's webinar as a recording link, and you can share that with anyone that could not attend today's session, or if you want to reference back to any of these different sections inside of here or rewatch. And one last thing to remember, AP automation is a journey, it is not a destination. So, take it piece by piece. I always talk about phased approach kind of structures, but we can help you in any step of that journey in that process. But thank you again, and have a great rest of your day and the rest of your week.